Hello world! Welcome back to this tutorial on building a Linux from scratch system. Now in the last video we've installed the final packages from chapter 8 and configured the system in chapter 9, and now we are at the beginning of chapter 10, which is the final chapter. So I'm really excited because I'm hopeful that we will get the system running today. Okay, so let's see what we need to do now. Okay, so the first thing that we are supposed to do first I need to mount the USB key again. This time I also mount the boot partition because, well, we want to configure it to be bootable, and yeah, today we will actually need the boot partition for this. We need to create an etc file system table, fs tab. I'm actually a bit surprised why this is in chapter 10. I think it would make sense in chapter 9 also, but okay. Where do I put this? I think inside change root 4 is full enough. So I will make another inside change root script. Okay, so let's look at this file system table. We have proc, sys, dev pts, and run. Yeah, basically the same things that we created when we go inside the change root. So not surprising that we also put them in the etc file system table, which are the file systems that will be mounted at boot time. Okay. So dev sdb2 is our root device, so that's that will be mounted at the root directory / and that's an ext2 system. Now we don't have a swap partition, so I'm gonna comment this out, but I will put dev sdb1 in here. Good. Now when we have the file system, then the next thing we need is, oh, look at that, we finally compile the Linux kernel. So chapter 10. Okay, this will run the Linux script here. Okay, when we have uncompressed the Linux kernel source code. I've talked about this topic in my video series about Linux kernel programming. In the first video, I go into the topic of compiling the kernel, and I don't want to go into that topic here again. So if you want to know more about this, just watch that video. Make Mr. Proper cleans up the directory so that you don't get any conflicts with possibly previous builds that might have failed. Okay, menu config would be a bit I don't want to make all the configuration selections here, so I will just take the default configuration by running make dev config. That gives us a default configuration, the .config file. Okay, we'll build the kernel, then we install the modules to libmodules. Now this will copy the kernel to the boot directory. I don't know about the system map. This config is our configuration file. Yeah, that's the one we get from devconfig. I don't think it's really necessary to store it in boot, but okay. Install the documentation. That does. Okay, this loads 2 kernel modules for USB devices. Okay. Then we install grub on SDB with no partition number. We install it at the beginning of the key, of the USB key. And then we need a grub CFG. Okay. Insmod ext2 loads the ext2 module into grub because we pull the kernel from an ext2 device. Well, I don't know which hard drive number will be assigned. I will leave it at HD0 for now. If that's not correct, well, we can still go through the grub command line. Okay, I've removed this boot here because this boot would only be necessary if our boot drive was also on our root drive, but it isn't. So this directory here is relative to this hard disk. And since this hard disk is mounted at /boot, then /boot /kernel name will be on the root directory of that drive. Okay, and we need to tell the kernel which device is our root device. It's SDB2. This might change on a reboot also, because we don't have udev rules for this USB key, but yeah, I will just set this to SDB2 for now, and if that's not correct, then we can deal with that later anyways. Okay, one more thing. This laptop is booted with UEFI, so grub install will cause problems because it will try to install UEFI, and we haven't compiled UEFI support into this grub install, so that's not gonna work. So we will need to set this to i386-PC. Okay, so this looks good. So let's run this. We might want to replace this dev SDB with our LFS disk, but I'm not sure if that would work so easily at this point. So if I put LFS disk here, yeah, you see this stays red. I think if I do it like this, it would just put the $LFS disk there. I'll leave it like that. Okay. Okay, it's extracting the kernel. The kernel is pretty big. This extraction can take a while. Okay, it's compiling. So this will take a while. I will just let this run and fast forward. Okay, this is looking good. This looks like it has been compiling. few warnings. Here we install the kernel modules, copy the kernel, config file, the system map. Then we run grub install. It's also looking good. Okay, I think we are ready to reboot. So let's try. So I'm going into the BIOS setup, boot menu, okay, this is odd. So this is my USB key, but I'm trying to use the legacy mode to boot, so UEFI would not be the correct boot method. So I would need legacy, but these are both not the USB key. So I will select this one here, but I don't think this will work because UEFI is not right here. Okay, this is my regular grub, not the grub from the USB key. So apparently it has not booted from the USB key. Okay, so I've done some research and apparently I've made a big mistake right at the beginning because doing all this on a USB key was apparently not such a good idea because to boot from a USB device, you must use the UEFI method to boot. And we haven't compiled UEFI into our grub, and I tried to fiddle with grub and tried to enable it, but I couldn't get it working. So now I just cannot boot from this USB key. So I will now take this spare hard drive that I had lying around, and I will put this in and then copy the USB key over on that drive, and then I will boot from that drive. So let's do that now. Well, I have run into a bit of a problem after I've took this hard drive out of the laptop. It refuses to boot because, well, that hard drive contains my home directory. So I cannot boot my machine right now. And, well, because of that, I cannot copy the Linux from scratch to the other hard drive. What I'm gonna do now is I will put this live USB key with a Manjaro system into the laptop and reboot. Okay, so we are back in business. Now I will plug in the other USB key. Wait. Okay, SDB is the Manjaro system. SDA must then be the hard drive. So I've plugged my Linux from scratch in now. As you can see, SDC, SDC1 and 2, the boot partition, the root partition. So now I will use the program DD to copy dev SDC, so the Linux from scratch USB key, output file dev SDA, the hard drive, and BS equal 128 megabytes. That's the buffer size. You should always set that to at least 4 megabytes or so, so that you don't synchronize all the time, which would be time consuming. Okay. Now this will take a while. Okay, so we are done copying the USB key to the hard drive. Just mount these drives so I can check their file system table and the grub CFG. Okay, now we've changed that to SDA. Save, exit. O2 should not be the correct partition number, because remember, this needs to be the partition of the boot drive. Okay, let's try booting from this. Boot device not found. Please install an operating system on your hard disk. For more information, visit hp.com. Okay, this reference to hp.com makes me think that this message probably comes from the hardware. So the mainboard probably complains that it couldn't do something with the hard drive. So it doesn't look like this is coming from grub or anything. Okay, I'll plug in the Manjaro stick again. Okay, so since it couldn't even start grub, apparently, I guess that it must be something really early in the boot process. So probably an issue with the hard drive. So let's check out the hard drive in fdisk. Okay, print the partition table. SDA is our boot drive. Ah, it doesn't say it's a boot drive. Let's activate the boot drive. Okay, write it to the disk. Okay, let's try again. Okay, this is looking good. We have a grub. Yeah, let's try this. Okay, it's asking me for a login. Check it out, we are logged in. Okay, I can echo. Let me ping google.de. Yeah, of course. Maybe I should plug it in. It says link is up. Look at that, we are pinging Google, we are online. Cool. I've been thinking about this for a couple of days now, and if this hard drive didn't have the bootable flag and it was cloned from this USB key, then logically this USB key shouldn't have the bootable flag either, right? And maybe that was the problem why I couldn't boot from it. I don't suppose that it will work, because in the boot menu the hard drive was shown even though it didn't have the bootable flag. You know, that's why we got that problem. And yeah, the USB key wasn't shown. So I don't suppose that it will work, but I will still try it. Okay, let's look at the partition table. Yeah, it's not bootable as I expected, so let's activate partition number 1. Write the partition table. And yeah, let's reboot now. I put this little sticker to help the autofocus again. Going to the BIOS setup. Legacy and Maxtronics. I can't believe it. That you gotta be kidding me. That I went through all that trouble and this one flag was all that was necessary. Ah! Oh boy. And there's grub. I can't believe it. Okay, let's boot it. It's booting. I can't believe it's booting. Kernel panic. Can you see that? Root device SDB2 unknown block 00. Kernel panic. Unable to mount root file system on unknown block 00. I've done some research on this, and yeah, kernel panic that says block device 00 not found means that it couldn't find the root device, and yeah, for USB devices that's not so uncommon apparently, because what happens is the kernel says, "Hey root device, are you there? Oh no, you aren't? Well, kernel panic." And then the device says, "Yes, I'm here," but it's too late. Okay, so we are talking about milliseconds here. So the kernel just doesn't wait long enough for the device to answer that, "Yes, I'm here." So what you can do is you can use the kernel parameter root wait and root delay and set that to whatever, 10 or so. So let's try again with that. By the way, executing startup delay, I've also set that up for the firmware to also wait for the USB key. Okay, let's try again. Root wait, or you could also say root delay equals 10. Hey, look at that. We are apparently in the init. Yeah, yes. There it is. We have a login. Okay, great. So we've also managed to boot from the USB key now. So there you have it, a running Linux system created really from scratch. We started with an empty directory and we wrote our scripts and ran them and downloaded all the source codes, compiled them and put them all together, and now we have a running Linux system. So that kind of concludes this series. But that leaves the question, what do we do now? Where do we go from here? On LinuxFromScratch.org there's also the section Beyond Linux from Scratch. And you can go to download, and you can download it as an entire PDF file again, or you can open it directly in your web browser. This is a list of more packages that are relatively popular, for these packages again, locations where to download source codes and instructions for compiling them. And when you look around here, there's really a lot of these packages, so a lot of things that you can do from here. I think I will make some appendices from some of these packages. Like I would be very interested in SSH, for example, or a graphics server, a desktop environment, stuff like that. But for now, I think for today this is enough. So if you liked this video and this series, like it, share it, subscribe, and see you next time.